we have the coolest episode planned for today. I think you're going to love it. Look at our amazing panel that has assembled to talk about everything you've ever wanted to know about serializing stories, but we're afraid to ask. Here we go. And to help us do it today, we have, of course, you know him. I love him. It is my brother and producer, Tom. And then the mastermind of this episode, the genius, the fabled Charlie. And then there is Lori killing me. There is the very talented, the spooky natural Laura. And then someone you maybe have never seen before. He's first time on our show. It is the fantastic chronicling Adam. And then, of course, she has come loaded with questions, as well as her many published novels as well. And there is the fantastic Carrie. Woohoo! All right, everybody. Look, I'm going to be honest. This is, well, yes, it was pointed out that Tom and I have both serialized stories. I didn't really think about it since nobody read mine. Nobody read mine about two philandering storytelling brownies who are trying to, totally bamboozle two demigods who don't realize, who have forgotten their demigods. Nobody read that story. I have to get it off Kindle Vella sometime soon. But I was like, I'm going to mostly sit back on this one and let these very talented people talk and discuss everything. But if you have questions in the chat about serializing or how to construct one's serial Bible or whatever, please let everybody know. Hello, Adam in the chat, doing double duty because y'all know I love to say it. Hello, Cool Gamer. So, take it away. Anybody? No? That we've suddenly forgotten.
Here, let me just do what I was thinking about. I was doing my research over the weekend for this. Mm-hmm. And something I feel people often forget about or they get overwhelmed when they think about doing serial stories is if you grew up with TV, you grew up on these. This is the heart of what makes a television show. This is why, all the major studios have, streaming-wise, have switched over to just making these TV show versions instead of making movies, because people are more interested in a serialized story than they are just a single 2-hour movie. Or, God forbid, a 4-hour movie that just has no breaks in it. I got bladders that, no, I can't do that. I need a pause button. And if you really want to get to the heart, though, of we've talked before about Laura. Laura, I don't know how to put this, but she started out okay when she started writing stories, but she got much better very quickly by doing short stories. She kept doing these short little ones, and she progressed really fast.
Sorry.
And you can do the same even with serial fiction. I mean, go watch a kids' cartoon series.
Go watch Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I was thinking more of stuff like truly kid series like Rugrats and Dexter's Lab and stuff, where they're only 10 minutes. They are how do you write a story, a full story that people will be happy with in as short time as possible, because kids ain't got no attention span, and nowadays adults don't have either.
Yeah, I've been in love with serials my entire life. Most of my favorite writers either started out writing serials or chose that as their main mode of action. And I love Louis Cha, I love Amistad Maupin. I'm a huge fan of these stories. And I think the reason that I really like them and love writing them is that you can't sleep on a chapter. They really do make you have to up your game as a writer. And every time I hear a writer talking about the saggy middle, struggling with the saggy middle, I'm like, you need to be thinking about whether you're going to release it as a serial or not. You need to be thinking about this as a serial. What is the plot of that chapter? What is the story that's being told there? How can you keep it thrilling, exciting, and engaging for your readers so that you don't have that sag? And that's something that has really carried me through with a lot of the fiction that I really love, is that it cannot have that saggy middle, because each chapter came out by itself and had to keep the audience entertained. It also had to be a full enough story that if this was the first issue that the reader encountered, it helped them. They had to understand who the characters were, what the events of the story were, and really had to encapsulate everything without feeling repetitive. And the best serial writers had a way of doing that didn't feel like, oh god, we're in the previously on part, which a lot of television shows really, to me, fail at, where they feel that necessity of doing a previously on instead of finding a way to diegetically within the story remind you of the things that you need to know to get there. You know,
Okay, so I'm gonna with the various serialized platforms that are out there now, it's less critical that you have that background in each episode, because it's not like a television show or a magazine where you could pick up, issue 12 and read it and then have to go back to it. Nobody's going to, or very few people, I won't say nobody, because there's always going to be somebody who decides to start on episode 12. But everything is up there and it's all labeled sequentially. So somebody would have to try to not start from the beginning.
I agree.
You can binge now, starting from episode 1.
I agree with you, especially if you're using Royal Road or Radish or Kindle Vella or any of those platforms out there. I've been serializing on Substack for my last experiment in this, and I had people coming in later episodes going, oh, I can't wait to find out why these certain things are happening, and then comment later, oh, I see you have other things. They were coming in at later chapters because of their explore and boost features. So I've been trying to keep that spirit alive for that platform, especially because I have actually experienced people coming in later and making comments, and only then realizing and then making second comments of, oh, I should go back to the beginning, even though like the header for each one is, here's the previous chapter, here's chapter 1, here's the link to the next chapter.
Right.
Even though that's there, they're like invisible to them or something.
You're gonna have to show me how to do that.
Yeah, I can.
And I haven't had any experience with Substack, so okay. So that's good to know if I should ever go over there. But I will completely agree with you on the point about the saggy middle of a novel, because everything that I've put up on everything long form that I've put up on a serial platform, I use Vella, has eventually made it into publication as a novel. And so it ends up making for a very fast-paced novel. It turns into one of those you can't put it down kind of novels, because every chapter is ending with a what happens next. Not quite a cliffhanger, but definitely okay, I've got to turn the next page. Just one more chapter isn't going to hurt tonight. Oh, wait, it's 4:00 in the morning.
I am so glad you said that. We need to kill cliffhanger syndrome. If you are working on a serial, if every chapter that you're writing ends in a cliffhanger, you done messed up. Like, it does have to have that, well, what's going to happen next, that intrigue to pull people forward. But I have encountered quite a few recently, particularly from younger writers, that have this very 1920s movie film serial vibe, where literally I can think of one particular fantasy serial I read recently where 2 chapters ended with somebody literally hanging off of a cliff.
Did you just hear them talking in a mid-Atlantic accent?
Yes. We need to be very careful about that.
Yeah.
I love this medium. After my first book came out, the initial thing that happened to me is I got an invitation to write a serial, and I jumped in, and that's where Fate's Horror came from, and it's now out as a collection, and it was such an enjoyable experience to work on. The other thing that I found very pleasurable about this, and still to this day, is being able to have an interaction with my readership as the story is progressing, so that I can see which elements are engaging them more. I can see which elements they're interacting with more, and be able to not necessarily change what I'm writing all that much, but kind of focus in more on the plot threads that they are most interested in. And so that would have been 2006 when I was doing Fate's Horror, the first run of Fate's Horror. And it was a wonderful experience then. It has been sketchy for many years in the intermediate period. We're not going to talk about the dark Wattpad days of everybody having their content stolen. Let's just skip forward. But the experience that I've been having over on Substack has been a really interesting one, in that the connection that I've been able to start developing with my readership there is more than just talking about the stories that I'm doing, and getting to know their interests and what they are also doing has been really helpful in me kind of focusing in on the content that I want to have going forward. As you know, I have a bunch of stuff pre-written, and I've been trying to figure out a schedule for how I wanted to do releases for everything. And getting to have this interaction with this audience as it's growing over there, and getting to kind of know what they're interested in and what they're looking at, help me prioritize which story, which series gets started next. And that relational aspect of serial writing is, for me, one of my favorite things about this. And one of the things that I found most lacking with Kindle Vella, because they do not, at least by the time I pulled out, they did not allow for comments on stories. I don't know if they've fixed that.
They do now.
They do now?
Yep,
So
and it has gone wide. They were testing it, but now it's gone wide, so it's on any story that you read.
Because there's something really special about being able to have that, not just feedback, but that relationship with the people that are actually interested in the story, to help make sure that you are staying on track. Because I talk about this a lot. We all have this fight in us between the wanting to be an artist and just have my vision be fully realized, and the dirty capitalistic parts of us that are like, but monies would be nice.
Yes.
And being able to actually engage with the audience that is really interested in what you are doing is the closest thing I've found to a middle road in there, without having to give in to the pressures in the industry to either write to market or to just simplify down into base tropes and that that you can sell because they're easily taggable on the sales platforms.
Yeah, I write on Vella, and so I'm not as familiar with the other platforms. I do know that there are now ways for the author to engage with the audience besides the comments. I mean, there was always the end of the episode where you could write and engage, at least put information out there for the readers.
Like the author note section.
The author notes, and solicit some feedback. And there were the polls as well. You could put up polls on every episode, and you could leave them. You could either have them closed down after a week or 2 days, or have them closed down after 10 years. So that somebody stumbling across it later on can still vote on it. But again, those are a couple of other ways to increase the engagement and to keep the readers involved. But it does all come down to story. If you're writing, the biggest problem I see right now with Kindle Vella is there is a hell of a lot of crap out there. Just terribly edited or not edited at all, or AI written, just jumbles of words thrown together, and it's not English that I ever learned. And it's up there. It's cluttering it. So if Amazon doesn't do something about getting improving the quality by taking stuff down, I think people are going to get burned by it and walk away, or they're just going to look for names that they know.
Yep.
And go, oh, okay, gee, I didn't know that this author had a serial story. I'll read that one because I know the author, and I know their stuff, which defeats the purpose of Kindle Vella. I mean, there are plenty of people that I have worked with as an editor who got their start writing Kindle Vella and then took the story and they want to turn it into a novel. So, that takes some editing, that takes some tinkering, that takes some work. But they would never have done it if they didn't have, the taste of success that Vella gave them. And I'm worried that that's going to get lost.
So for anybody interested in actually doing a serial, one, there are a plethora of platforms that are out there. And I think you should first start by looking at the genres that you write in and figuring out what's best for you. I mentioned a few earlier. If you're writing light novels, you should be on Royal Road. They are really big over there, and they have ways that you can monetize your fiction through external platforms. I don't think they've built in their internal monetization yet. They keep saying that they're going to do it, but last time I checked, which was about a month ago, the features weren't there. Radish is also very, very popular for people that are writing romance fiction. A lot of these platforms really skew heavy towards romance fiction. So if that is your genre, there are plenty of places for you. But do kind of feel them out before you go in. And I would say before you even start writing, try to figure out which platform you are interested in, find out what its criteria are, because some do require exclusivity, some do not, and what playground you want to play in. And also check out what stories are doing well over there and see if that feels like a place that your fiction will do well in. Because I have noticed for some, when I have gone around, when I was looking for a home for the Shadow Phoenix saga, I looked around at a lot of places before I settled on Substack. And the reason I settled on Substack is I could not find a platform where I saw the kind of epic fantasy that I am working on really succeeding. They had focused in either on mystery, most of them on romance, a lot of them on light novels, which are really serialized light novels are really big, especially on a lot of the more Asian and European sites that offer serialization. And the reason I ended up choosing Substack was it, one, gave me control over my relationship with my audience. So that audience that I'm building there, I can literally export and take to other platforms if I decide to go to Ghost or any other provider like this, which I really like having that access to the audience. And also,
that's huge.
Yeah. And the features that it offered really suited me. That does not mean that it will suit everyone. I am not a paid spokesperson for them, though I feel like I talk about them enough. Hey, Chris, if you want to give me some money, I'm chill. I am cheap, have bills to pay. But
I know you got me to get on there, and I've posted, and Laura's on there, Carrie's on there, Tom has posted as well.
Megan's on there.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about that is, with it being set up where you can do on-platform monetization, and it takes care of a lot of the outreach and marketing emails for you automatically. I have been watching my subscribership growing over there, and I've been developing a paid subscribership over there, which I am always shocked when somebody's like, here, I'm going to pay for a year of this in advance. But people are doing it over there, which is really nice. The thing that I'm saying is you need to be thinking about what it is that's going to serve your needs. What is it that you're wanting? If somebody paying you for a year's worth of stories that you may or may not have written yet is going to freak you out and add stress to your life and make it harder for you to write, don't be on a service where somebody can pay you for a year of stories in advance. Don't do it. Find the platform that works for you and that serves your needs. And that could be Kindle Vella. I've been very open about my struggles with that platform. As y'all know, anybody who's been following my channel for a while, I've had stories taken down numerous times for ridiculous things. I have actually received the rarest of all things, an apology from Amazon for some of the things that they did to my account there. And it was just, I got tired of it. Yeah, I did print it out. Yeah.
Good.
Because I was shocked when they formally apologized for some of the stuff that they did. But I got tired of the fight. That's one of the main reasons I left Vella, was I was constantly in a struggle with them. As you know, there are trolls out there that hate me, which I find hilarious because I am a no one. I am a no name. I am not big enough to have trolls to hate me. But I kept getting mass flagged. I kept having other issues. And I wanted to just go somewhere else.
Right. And I'll just throw out there, because my experience with Vella has been the opposite. I haven't had the trolls attack. I haven't had and this is not an invitation.
So you think.
I haven't had the issues with episodes getting stuck in review hell for 72 hours. I haven't had episodes taken down because of content violations, and some of them, especially the ones under my pen name, are pretty. Yeah, they're spicy, and it's been, for me, like I said, I'm the opposite side of the coin. It's been a good experience for me. And, the Kindle Vella community of authors it's pretty strong. I mean, there are lots of different subgroupings within that community. And there is a bit more, there can be a little pettiness between groups, but if you don't engage, it's not unlivable, and that's just that's human nature. But the platform itself has been good.
So once you found a platform that you feel comfortable in, and like I said, there are a lot of them. There are a lot of places that you can go to find resources on them. I've named some of what I feel are the bigger ones that are out there right now. But I would say the first thing that you should be thinking about when you're thinking about a serial is its focus. To me, serials die because they're unfocused. I'm just going to do a romp in a setting. Now, that doesn't mean you can't do like an anthology series. That is a different thing. That is a focus on a completely different thing. They're harder to sell because people like to get invested in the characters and follow characters through, but you can do an anthology series. When I say focus, the story really shouldn't try to be all things to all people. It should have a point of view. It should have a hook that pulls the characters in, the readers in, and pulls them along through to the end in a way that I would say needs to be a little bit more evident, a little bit quicker than most people do in their novels. This hook needs to set in. Well, we see people debating, should your hook be in your first or your third chapter? When you're talking about novel writing, it needs to be as early as you can get it in the
third chapter.
I've seen a lot of people lately talking about it should be in the third chapter. That your first two chapters are.
Who are these fools?
Setting.
Yeah,
there are a lot of.
It should be on your first page. I said it.
There's a lot of really bad writing advice out there right now. But the earliest you can set that hook, whatever it is, you should start with a setting it as soon as you can, and then staying on that thread.
That is why when Gloria and I are watching movies for the other one, was it Creative Recharge? Every third movie I make the joke, because essentially this is the trick for any story that's going to start out slow. If you know that it's going to take a lot of build up to make this interesting and to give you context for the story, the trick is the first 10 minutes is the middle of your story where the big action takes place. And then right before you know how the action finishes, you pause everything and you say the line, "Hey, I bet you're wondering how I ended up in this situation."
Oh,
Let me
I
tell you.
know. It's like the silliest
Emperor's New Groove.
device, but
Deadpool.
yes.
What it does though is it tells the audience, it guarantees your audience that don't worry, I know the following is a bit slow, but we will get somewhere fun. Here's I gave you a taste so you'd know to slog it out. That is what it's for. You have to give them the hook as quickly as possible.
Okay, Naruto Shippuden did that. Episode 1 is like the confrontation you've been waiting for like 100 episodes. And then the next thing it cuts and is like, we don't get to that until 100 more episodes. It's like,
that's how you do it wrong though, because that is just too long a wait.
It's too long.
100 episodes.
Inappropriate.
200 episodes.
That's not a slog. That's a death march.
That is, the bridge over the River Kwai.
Okay, but for my middle grade, my inciting incident is the first line. It's my opening line.
Yeah, because it's why do I care about this story?
Mm-hmm.
That's the hook.
That's got to be your first hook. Is why do you care about the story and these characters? Yeah. Because if the reader doesn't care, why would you keep reading that? Like, it's not like you're like, oh, I need to read or else the monster comes for me. People are looking for a distraction.
So with my middle grade, my opening line is introducing that somebody is moving in across the street. And because that happens, that opens up the option for me to describe the house, describe the street, describe the neighborhood. Like, does she fit in the neighborhood? Is she a little funky? Like, are all the other neighbors funky too? Like, I set up the world of Nightmare Lane because somebody moves into it. And so that opens up the discussion of, is she a normaler or is she one of those monstrous type of creatures?
Yeah, the story that I have that's starting this Thursday is a Celtic core queer romance. And it starts with the moon spying on the main characters. Because I really need you to understand right from the get-go, everything in the setting is low-key alive and plotting. Everything has an agenda. Everything is maybe out to get you, maybe trying to help you. Definitely wants something from you. And so we open up with literally the moon like really upset that there are trees in the way. And it's not able to see all of the action that's going on. And hope, starting off with that promise, because if I think maybe a better way to say what I was wanting to say is more than just standard novel writing. Serialized fiction is about promise and reward. You really need to be making those promises, making them often, and fulfilling them. Don't be like, well, if I promise this in 20 or 100 episodes later, I'll finally reward you with having finally gotten it. Now, I'm sure...
Pulling a, what's his name, who took over Doctor Who after Davies?
You're talking about
Moffat. How many questions did he open that he never answered?
Yes.
I'm still salty. Moffat, you owe me so many answers, you little so-and-so.
Moffat, you kept promising the Valeyard was going to be in your run, and he never showed up.
Mm-hmm. We're fine. We're fine. This is not a Doctor Who support group meeting. It's okay.
Isn't everything a Doctor Who support meeting now?
I think it is.
Yeah. No, I fully agree, Charlie. And the Vela I've had the most success with, it got them hooked on the character right from the beginning, the point of view character, because it's all told in first person, and got them hooked right from the beginning, and then set up the hook for the series at the end of that episode. So it got them invested in who the person was, their motivations, what they're doing, and then at the end of the episode, it's like, and all right, now you want to stay tuned because something's going to go down. And just that hint of it at the end of the episode to carry over into the next one, and so forth and so on. Like you said, Charlie, promise and reward.
And I think that that's a better metaphor than the setup and payoff that we usually talk about when we're talking about novel writing, because you need to give those rewards, especially if you're on a platform where you're expecting people to pay for this fiction. If they're paying you for that chapter and they feel like they did not get their money's worth, they're going to stop paying for future chapters. If they are doing a monthly subscription to read your stories, and you are not delivering those rewards, that they're not feeling like, oh yes, this is the story I am paying for, you have to be making those promises and rewarding them. And when you think about it that way, it helps you understand how not to always cliffhanger, like literal cliffhanger, at the end of your chapters. You are promising in the next chapter, this particular thing could happen, and then you pay that off. You reward that anticipation in some way that makes them feel, oh yeah, I am glad I stayed around to get the next chapter. And when you're thinking about it in this promise and reward, having that connection, that continuity, you don't have to always be raising the stakes, which is another really bad problem I see in a lot of serialized fiction, where, oh wow, everything is now beyond God tier and we're only on chapter 13. What? And that can work. That can work. I'm a huge Dragon Ball fan, as many of you know. But dear God, I don't need an entire season of just Goku screaming as he's powering up. This is too much.
What? You
Kaioken times 4.
How dare you say this?
He got so that mangaka got so confused in his own writing, he forgot several of the techniques and characters throughout. Hence why several things don't show up for a decade.
I would like to point out the joy of a story Bible.
Yes.
So that you don't just drop characters and scenes and questions and threads. Yeah, very nice. Show us. I'll make you big, Carrie.
Oh dear.
Show us your binder.
I'm redoing it right now.
Look at this.
But this is the bumper sticker that I stuck in the.
I love it.
It's a medieval inspired fantasy, so I thought that was appropriate.
Very nice.
I have another one for my contemporary series too.
Very nice.
I've started using Obsidian to track my story Bibles, because they are getting quite, they're already, for the Blinded Angel series, I think I'm up to chapter 28. In that one, it's already got 2 plot arcs completely written. Most of the 3rd plot arc is written for it. There's a lot of lore and this, that, and the other that has been popping up in there. And I have found that as a really good way, because I can put the actual text of the story in and then link out and build the story Bible out of it, so that I am reminding myself where it is connected, where things have been used, where things have not been used. And with their tagging system, I've been able to mark loose plot threads to remember to come back to them and not leave them unresolved. Because there are some things that I know are setting up for later stories. I am not exclusively using the Levitt paradigm for my outlining for serialized fiction, but I'm using kind of a modified version of the Levitt paradigm for that. And for anybody who doesn't know that language, the Levitt paradigm was created by, I think his name was Paul Levitz. He was one of the heads of DC Comics. And it basically reminds you to set up an A, B, C, and possibly a D story that will carry you through. Your C story gets promoted to a B, your B gets promoted to an A, and that way you have this constant funnel of new story coming in from behind that's slowly building up and keeping the momentum going forward for your stories. It's a fairly simple way to keep track of and to introduce new ideas and new stories so that the story can keep going forward, especially if you're working on a more ongoing story like I am with some of mine. And to keep track of where they are and where they're being introduced so that story threads don't just pop out of nowhere. Because a D story is often one line of dialogue that a character says that introduces a new idea. A C story may get a full scene in your story. By the time it's a B story, it's probably the subplot of that chapter. A story, it's now the main story of that chapter or that arc of the serial. It's a decent way to organize your thoughts when you're thinking about how to keep a story organized. It's like I said, it's not the only thing that I do, but it's something I find myself continuously referencing in the way that I'm putting together my serialized fiction. But in doing that, you're constantly looking at your plot beats and making sure that you are setting up the future ones so that you are not neglecting that setup, so that when that really angry leprechaun comes out of nowhere and tries to take over everything, people have been seeded this idea that, by the way, in this world, there are angry leprechauns. And no, they're not the Lucky Charms guy. They're really scary gods and gods of wealth that have been characterized as something else that's already been preceded into the world. So by the time the leprechaun shows up, you're like, oh no, he's here. And you've already built up that sense of dread. And keeping track of all of that is a lot of effort and a lot of work if you are not setting up a good system ahead of time to do it. I have used Plotter. I've used a lot of other software over the years. I still use Plotter a lot for this when I'm thinking things through. You can just do an outline, whatever works best for you, but keep track of your story. Make sure that you're setting up your future episodes and future plot arcs so that your characters are invested and are starting to think, your readers are starting to think about, oh, wait a minute, didn't you say? And by the time they're starting to think, well, wait, didn't you say? Then it shows up in the story. Because remember, it can take 2 to 3 times for a reader to see something for it to stick into their brains, which is why we almost always use the rule of 3 when we're trying to make sure a big thing is seeded and ready for the reader to have a reaction to it. So by using something like the Levitts, where you are seeding those ideas early, it's not a very DC movie thing where, oh, by the way, there's a new monster here now, and yay, we're really sidetracking now, and we're going to fight the new monster because, I don't know, we forgot what to do, and we let a trailer company make the rest of our movie.
Something giant is going to shoot down from the sky and destroy the kingdom or the earth.
So
it really is about planning. Sorry, Laura.
For me, the only serialization I've really done is fan fiction. And so I have a problem where when I start out pretty strong, I have ideas, and then I lose interest in them or catch up with the anime manga series, and I'm waiting for the reveal so I can incorporate it and keep my story more canon bound. And so it's like, why does this author have arthritis and not update in years? So, what are your guys' thoughts on writing the complete story before you start publishing chapter by chapter, so that you know you're not going to leave it hanging and you know that you can go back and thread things through, versus the immediate, I did it, dopamine hit and get comments and get inspiration from the people. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I've been talking a lot, and I'd be interested if Adam has any views on that.
Yes, Adam. What you got? We've all heard each other's ideas. What you got?
So, with the stories that I've been putting up on Vela, I tend to write ahead. And again, this is, me being primarily a novelist, and everything that I write on Vela, I fully intend to have out there as a novel at some point, as a long form work. So I'm writing ahead on that and scheduling ahead so that I'm not to the point where I write the whole thing and then chop it up and put it on, and serialize it, because you do need to. There is that difference between the serialized and the novel. That you have to even it out a little bit when you turn it into a novel. Otherwise, it's almost too much for the reader to take. It's too fast paced. It's too intense because you're constantly doing the promise and reward and promise and reward and promise and reward. But I'll get 2 months worth of Vela episodes ahead before, and then post some up, and then that gives me time to write more. And I'm listening to all you guys talk about, all the apps you use and the Bibles and everything else.
I was going to ask Charlie.
I'm looking around going, yeah, nope, got none of that. Nope, got none.
So I agree. Being a little bit ahead is always a good thing. I don't think you should ever start a serial without knowing how at least your first plot arc is ending. And it should have a satisfying ending, so that if that's all that you ever write in that plot arc, it feels like a complete story. You should have your arcs completely figured out before you start writing. And you know how much it pains me to say that. I have been very vocal as a pantser. I really like pantsing my fiction. But when it comes to serialization, you need to know if a certain thing is going to be happening in the finale, that you have set it up ahead of time.
Mm-hmm.
Because yes, when you go to putting out the book form, you can go back and edit and fix some of that continuity, those continuity issues. Those continuity issues will take people out of the serial if they're too pronounced.
Mm.
It's kind of like when you're watching a TV show and all of a sudden something comes completely out of nowhere and changes the story, and not because it's a plot twist, but because they just they neglected to mention, oh, by the way, at some point previously. So you should always know your full story. For the Shadow Phoenix Saga, I already have all 6 books completely plotted out. I know everything that's going to happen, all of the characters that are going to be in there. I know the plot twists. I know the whole thing, all the way through. Raid was completely written before I started serializing it. Rebirth will not be. I will be writing a bit ahead on it. I will be staying ahead with it, but that is going to be a much longer book, and I am going to be releasing those chapters closer to real time than I would have normally, because of the size of that book, it would probably take me about a year to a year and a half to write it, and I don't want to have the readership have to wait that long between releases. So I'm going to be putting that out as it is in production. But like I said, I not only know the full plot of that book, but the 4 books that follow it. So I'm able to start seeding those ideas early. I'm able to build that up and make it work. So no matter what you're doing, you need to have that full picture in your mind. And you need this. I think this probably comes back to being a huge fan of Joe Straczynski and the work that he did. And really, I'm one of those old people on the internet that remembers the old news groups where he would participate and actually talk to you back in the early halcyon days of the internet. And him,
the internet was never that young. It has existed forever. How dare?
But I remember him talking about how every story had an out, every plot thread had an out. So if the show got canceled, he could wrap it up. It could end and have at least a semi-satisfactory ending. He worked in trapdoors to make that. The series I'm talking about is Babylon 5, which at the time was a daring idea. It was a 5-year plot arc for a TV series, and people really were not doing that when he was pitching the show around. And he was able to more or less actually do the story that he wanted. And he had outs for characters. He set up multiple possible through lines for characters. So if an actor left the series, he could replace them with a character that had already been set up to work into the main plot. He had really done a lot of work there. Now, we're not dealing with actors or things like that, so that's not as important for us. But having those outs built into your story and really thinking about how that works. If for some reason I lose complete interest in writing the Shadow Phoenix saga, the end of Rebirth is a satisfying ending. It's not completely satisfying because you're like, well, what about some of this other stuff that's out there? But it is designed to be an end that will be it completes a lot of story that's happened up to that point, and is hopefully going to be satisfying for readers when they get there. Now, hopefully you're sitting back going, but weren't there other issues that you had brought up? And they're going to come back and be interested in the four books that follow. But I've built those trapdoors in. So having that kind of forethought in what you're doing does help both my own sake, because this is a series that I'm probably going to be writing for the next 5-6 years. I know that I have those escape tunnels if I need to pull the ripcord and run. But also, I'm not afraid of running out of story because I know how the story works. I know I have enough knowledge about it. I am not concerned that I will get to a point where writer's block will come in and be like, oh God, I don't know what happens next. I know that's not the answer you wanted.
So yeah, like I have one fan fiction that I've been writing. It's been on hold for like a year and a half now. I came up to a point where it's like, is this person a double agent? Are they a triple agent? Are they just a double agent? Or are they like, where does the true allegiance lie? I don't know. And so I came up against the wall and it's like, oh, I'm just take a break and let it percolate. And then a year and a half later, dang it. But this is fan fiction, so people aren't paying me. And so I'm not beholden to them to, like, it'd be nice to let them see how this all plays out, but it's not like they're monetarily invested in it.
And that's really the difference between writing as a hobby and having fun with it. I'm a huge fan of fan fiction. I think it serves a very vital function out there, even if that's the only thing you ever write. Being creative is in its own way a reward, and people should be creative as much as they want. The big difference does click in when you are expecting or hoping that people will financially support what you're doing. And that's when that responsibility kicks in of, this isn't lost. I'm sorry, Glory. I don't mean to trigger you yet again, but this isn't lost. You need to know what the end is.
Explain the polar bear. I'm not okay.
You need to know what the ending is from the beginning. Because when you don't, that's why audiences feel betrayed. And you also need to pace yourself out so that you have time to get to the ending that you were imagining. I have I truly believe the Game of Thrones TV series ended the way George R.R. Martin told them it was going to end. They did not give themselves the space, the time, or the talent to come in and make it believable that the characters would go on the arcs that they did to get to where they ended up. And that's why it feels like a betrayal to the people that were really into the series. But you as a writer need to have that understanding right from the get-go. If your main character is in fact Dragon Hitler, maybe making them the hero for the first 5 of 7 seasons to have them suddenly decide, oh no, I'm Dragon Hitler in the 7th season, maybe not the best twist.
What?
Don't make people empathize with your villains.
Yes.
Rule 1. Do not give your villains backstories. It makes them too relatable
Yes,
and upsetting.
Stop trying to make fascism look attractive. I'm not okay. Oh, I'm so over it.
Well, Tom, I'm actually going to throw one at you. Tom Zarek from the Battlestar Galactica reboot. He was brilliantly done, even though he ended up being the villain. He was always an antagonist, but he wasn't always the bad guy. And you really did, as you watch it, you're going, yeah, this is a guy who he has his convictions and just believes something other than the leadership.
Okay, so here's the difference, and there is a notable difference. It's one thing to show your character, your villain's background in their personal character and such. It's another thing to give the background for why they are and will be a terrible person. If you show their childhood and essentially say, see, it's not really their fault.
Mm-hmm.
That is where the problem comes in. It's not just, you've known this character for a while. There's plenty of villains we've seen that for, and that's fine. Nobody, but it's that part where you say, but they aren't responsible for who they are. It was everything before them that creates a problem for your audience.
I will say, Tom, I'm still traumatized by the reaction to The Chain when it came out, because the amount of hateful emails I got that Nathan did not end up with the serial killer that was trying to kill him at the end of the story, even though I gave that serial killer no backstory, no redeeming traits. Like, they are a straight up villain. The amount of hate mail I got that, what do you mean he didn't redeem the serial killer that was trying to kill him all series and they end up happily ever after at the end? How dare you? And I'm like, the first words I put on everything is, this is not a romance. They're not going to end up together. This is not what is going on here. It's thriller, not romance. It's thriller, not romance. The audience will read into whatever relationship that they want to.
And that is part of the problem of that's where, like, if you give the childhood of a villain and you make them empathetic, because everyone has a childhood, versus if you give them, tech bro stoic morals.
Oh no.
That is not.
They're so much easier to not relate to.
That is not giving them an empathizable background. That is giving them a character that stays true. And so you're not surprised when their morals disagree with, helping others. And that's, there's the difference of it. That doesn't make them empathizable to make them a sturdy character that always stays true to their worldview. We've all got those. We definitely, every Thanksgiving in America, see our relatives who are like this, of there ain't nothing going to change that immovable thought, no matter how wrong it is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's when you go, oh, but look at the childhood and the abuse they went under that warped them into this person. Now guess what? They're going to just do even worse to everyone else. But don't blame them. The world had it coming. Which, I've read those stories. Those are sometimes fun, but those are power trips.
People are out there shipping serial killers left, right, and center. I don't know.
I don't get it.
What's that series? You?
Yes. Yes, where even the writer had a mental breakdown. know.
I
And
stopped writing for 5 years after the chain came out, and I do believe that a big part of that, not exclusively, the overwork, the burnout, all of that was a big part of it. But I do believe a big part of that was constantly getting emails from people. Why did he not fall in love with his serial killer? Why did they not? Why didn't he redeem? What? No, no.
all right. Well, we are at a nice stopping point to take a little breaky break. Here is a lovely time to go get a snack. Did you know popcorn is the official snack of writers throughout the planet? I have this on authority. I am not sponsored. That said, I'm going to have toast, the Fink family official snack. Does something ail you? Have you had toast yet?
I'm going to be like deported and deranked of my author status. I have no popcorn and I have no maple syrup in my house.
Laura.
Is there no phone number you can call to get emergency supplies?
Remember, you should say that while you're trying to get your Canadian citizenship.
I know! They're going to come and raid my cupboards.
Yes.
Fail.
Expect to go.
Help, I'm a young, immature Canadian and I have run out of maple
We're
syrup.
like, they're going to say, we see no Blizzard chips. We see no maple
Oh,
syrup.
no. I have ketchup chips.
Oh, well, you're okay then. You'll be all
I have
right.
ketchup chips.
Your Canadian citizenship paperwork is still okay then. I mean, yes. Now, of course, I want you to think about putting all dressed on your next grocery list. So I'm just trying to help you, Laura. Anyhow, think about getting a snack or something to drink. We are a hydrate or dihydrate kind of crowd. Do you have something? Water is lovely, but coffee and tea are also delicious. And we will come back at approximately 10 minutes for more of what? I don't know.
Chaos.
More novel serialized chaos. That is all I can promise you. And we will see y'all in approximately 10 minutes.
Minute and a half. Whoop.
And we're back-ish. At least I am. How's everybody doing today?
Oh, the
Beep,
better
beep, beep.
being here.
Oh
I
man, get the dogs out and back in.
I donated all of my BBD beeps to Glory, and now I have none left.
Oh, you're what?
My BBD beeps.
Ah, yes. Yes, I was thrown off by my little brother restarting his computer and getting back in and not muting. And then when I asked, what's the time? Going, did I hear an echo? Yep, there it is. Spence has sent a note. Damn it, Tom. Scared the crap out of me. Made me jump and drop my pasta. See what you did, Tom? Stop, little brother.
Oh,
dare you? How very dare.
Not the gumdrop.
Not the pasta. Save the pasta.
Save the pasta. And he left his door open, and so there's an echo. Brothers, y'all.
So, cereals. What are they good for?
Eating for breakfast.
Right. Yum, yum, yum. I like it when it's
Night
marshmallows.
snacks.
Let me tell you. Little corn pops.
So there's a specific length expected per episode for Bella. Are there specific lengths expected for other platforms as well? Like, is there a general serialization length of chapter episodes?
I would personally say that there's not an expected. It really depends on the genre that you're writing in.
Yeah.
Whether or not they want short, and by short I mean like 500 to 600 word chapters, up to really expansive, horrifyingly large ones that I have seen on some platforms, especially in the space opera and epic fantasy genres. Sometimes those chapters can get, wow, you're writing a novella every time. Yay.
I'm not going that far. I do know that some of my word count does vary, but I am using the Vela minimum still. Otherwise, I would have like 150 word chapters.
What is the
I am
Vela
that
minimum?
bad sometimes.
500 words?
600 words.
Is it 600?
Oh,
I thought it
It's
was
been a
600.
while. Yeah.
Yeah, and the
That sounds
sweet
about
spot is about 800 to 1,000. Yeah.
Didn't Charles Dickens used to do serials?
Yes.
Yep.
Almost everything that you're familiar with from Charles Dickens started.
I mean, it's not so bad with my story that's currently up on Substack, but when I'm working on this, I'm blurring it. Sorry, my misadventures. I'm working on volume 2 right now. That's not serialized anymore.
Okay, you ready to show? Sorry,
And
we're gonna get it eventually.
yeah, here's volume 1.
Not a face.
But
not
yeah,
a face.
I'm still working on volume 2. Even though it's not serialized anymore. But yeah, at least for that, I could probably put up word entries and
I would say if you're working on a
so
platform,
having a word minimum is a good basis, I think.
yeah, you should definitely know what the smallest chapter is you're willing to put out and what your audience will bear. Working on any platform that gives you a lot of flexibility in word count, that really comes down to one, knowing the genre that you're in, and also knowing what your readership will tolerate. You will figure out really soon, if you start putting out long chapters and no one's reading you anymore, that your chapters were wrong. And I personally do not see anything disingenuous about editing those down and or rewriting them to repair that relationship, if that's something that you're into and feel like putting the work and effort in. But you will start getting a feel for what your audience is really into and how much that they're reading. One of the biggest flaws in all of these platforms is, unlike YouTube, which will tell you how many minutes somebody watched of your video, what the average watch through time is, most of these platforms do not give you a scroll percentage or anything like it to let you know how much of the story that they're getting through.
Mm-hmm.
And even then, that's not a helpful metric, because there are people that will read like a portion of it and then scroll to the bottom and hit the like or to hit the comment, and that counts as a full read even though they did not do a full read. So there's not really a good metric out there to base those opinions on, other than what is expected of your genre and what your audience will bear.
So I can share with you so my background is in journalism, as well as creative writing and cookbooks. And I can share with you what I have picked up over time, both as a published journalist and also what editors have told me. But again, I would like to give a sort of caveat of, it's really about being familiar with your readership and your genre readership. So with newspaper articles, like say the columns, the standard is somewhere between a minimum of 500 words, or really a minimum of 450 words, and a maximum of 750. And not all newspapers will even print 750 words for a column. Like, it's just too long and they'll cut it. But with magazines, it's a similar of like a minimum, preferably of 450. And ideally, they like people to hit right around 700, 750 words. They'll take up to 1,000 or 1,200 words. That'll be a 2-page article. But it has to be something that they can sell ad space on. Like, so something like a type of subject or feature that, like, their ad manager can sell space. And that's why the 1,200 words is 2 pages, even though 750 words is 1 page. So, and that's so they can sell some ad space in the corner, like a quarter page. So I was also told by magazine editors, your ideal length of a magazine article is approximately 5 minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, depending on the readership, because it's the length of time it takes to do something in the bathroom. And when I mean something, I mean a specific movement. And and after I heard that in my early 20s, I started noticing that some magazines, like, how do I say this, that skew heavily to middle-aged men, have longer articles. Because, yes, we know about the history of, say, middle-aged dads spending time in the bathroom. And so, again, it's one of these of, I can't tell you, oh, this is like the gold standard length, because it has to do with your readership demographics. Are they moms who are lucky if they've got time for 300 words? Or are they moms who are only reading late at night to wind down for bed, and so they have upwards of 20 to 45 minutes? Or are they dads looking to fill the time in their bathroom quiet time of, again, 10 to 30 minutes? Or are they teenagers who have endless amounts of time to read all weekend?
Binge read until 4 a.m.
Right? So, like, it is very important to think about the lives of your readers' demographics, of what are their discretionary time spaces. So and honestly, you kind of just need to, like, think about getting in their shoes. I mean, are they young women who have commutes that maybe are upwards of an hour? So they're looking for either audiobooks. I mean, let's be honest, it's when they're listening to a lot of those true crime podcasts. But also, like, late at night when they can't sleep, because it's so lulling to hear about other people's murders, right? I guess so. I don't quite get it. But cool. I went through my true crime phase when I was a teenager. And that was way before there were any podcasts, y'all. So long ago. It was the 90s. I had to read them in magazines. Oh, children, gather round and help me to my car. So,
although Mom went through her own true crime podcast in her retirement. I mean, how many, what's his name, audiobooks did she listen to?
Oh, you mean the Mickey Spillane, everything?
Yeah. Every
crime detective novel Elliot Gould ever recorded. So all the Mickey Spillane, but he also then started doing, I can't remember the other guy, Humphrey Bogart did a couple movies of his.
Mike Hammer.
Mike Hammer, thank you. Yeah, like anything, Elliot Gould recorded so much in the 80s and 90s, y'all, of just hardball detective novels, and Mom would just buy any of them. And then we'd listen to the sultry tones of Elliot Gould talking about being a questionable detective and questionable human being.
So if you wanted to think about time and your writing, the industry standard is to consider 155 words a minute to be average reading speed. If you want to expand that out, you could do 130 to 155 to get a rough estimate for people that read slower to faster, but most estimates are based off of 155 words a minute. And that will give you an idea of, so I want this to be a 10-minute read. So what is a 10-minute read? That's about 1,550 words for a story. And I've actually found that to be a fairly sweet spot for most of my readers. I generally target, when I'm writing, at around 1,600 words, plus or minus 200, for what I like to do for a single story. But
so like a day of Nano.
Yeah. So, but having said that, one of the most popular chapters of any serialized story I ever did was Black Moon Rising, and that was a 10K story that was released as a single chapter. And I still have people talking to me about it today, even though it came out a very, very long time ago, because it had everything that people were looking for. It grabbed people, it held their interest through, and gave them I'm going to say satisfying ending. That's a tragic story, but that's a tragic chapter in that story. But it gave them the satisfying ending that they were looking for. And they talk about that a lot, which has always made me question whether or not my chapters maybe should air a little bit longer than they do, just because that one has stuck in the minds of people in a
Now
way.
you know what led to the dark path of Terry Pratchett.
Yeah. And I don't know that, I don't think that it was just the story elements that made that one stick around, because I've written similar stories that have had that kind of tragedy in them before. But I think there was a sweet spot of the amount of time they got to spend in that story with the events that transpired in it. And that really is something that you should be bearing in mind when you are constructing this. David Gerald in once said, and I found this to be very true in my writing, your readers will start checking out if your scenes are over 800 words. That doesn't mean that you can't write a scene that's over 800 words, but they will start drifting and skimming after that point. And that has been a very good guidepost for me over the years to try to keep the stories that I am working on to be a little bit neater, tighter, and to not let my scenes languish as long as they often want to.
Well, I mean, also noting that 150 words per minute average, that means that 10K is around an hour.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it is a different time period people, though, do often set aside to read, which is about 45 minutes to an hour. So it does kind of help you figure out like which size stories you want to write, to what is your audience going to be, what audience will be interested in that size story.
So, for example, for the Shadow Phoenix Saga, when book one formally starts coming out, the chapter length is going to almost double, because the most common feedback that I got was that the chapters were too short. And they wanted to spend more time in the story that was going on. Granted, I am also writing epic fantasy. That is an epic fantasy series, and epic fantasy tends to have a bit more luxurious pacing to the way that its stories are told. If it was more straightforward sword and sorcery, they probably would be fine with the 1,600 word chapters. But I've heard that from a lot, so I am going to be experimenting with doing longer chapters going forward with that story. And as always, I'll report back my findings.
Especially listening to you read it, Charlie.
What?
Especially listening to you read it, listening to you reading it, which is how I would was doing it for Raid. I still have to listen to the last couple of chapters, but I'd be listening to it, and then all of a sudden, wait, it's over? What? I want more. I don't want to wait till next week, which is why when a new chapter would come out, I would listen over again, and I would be thinking.
So yeah, I've gotten that feedback a lot. So it's again that relationship with your readership and learning what they want.
So to make your chapters longer, are you just combining episodes, or are you adding in new stuff, or letting stuff breathe more? What are you doing?
For Rebirth, because the story, that setting is very atmospheric in the way that the mood is handled, and I am letting it have a little bit more breathing space. I am allowing myself to get in a little bit tighter with the characters so that they can have a little bit more voice in the story. So I'm letting them not necessarily monologue or anything like that, but the POV is going to be a bit stronger in those stories going forward, so that we are really getting into the character, because those are the two things that I have learned from the market research of putting the story out. Again, one of the things I love about serialization, that are the two aspects that people are getting most into in there, is they're loving the characters. They like the action and the events as well, but they're really liking the characters and wanting to spend more time with them. And because I'm trying not to rely on straight up fantasy tropes and have spent so much time building up what is, new fantasy races and stuff for this, they want more time to kind of be with that. So I'm trying to think more Tolkien-esque than I was before in the way that I'm writing it, where I'm going to give that time and that breathing room to the characters and to the setting, so that it can bring people in a more immersive way that they're wanting. Because I was focusing on it more as kind of an action adventure story, and it has elements of that, but the things that people are really keen in on are like the chapter with the Moon Maiden was very, very popular, and it's a fairly slow-paced chapter, but they got to spend a lot of time with two characters in really dig into the world, and that's what they were wanting. So getting that feedback again, to me, is one of the greatest things about serial writing. Is basically, I was told by my readers, your innate instinct to just linger a bit more in a moment, to let that moment really set in and settle in, is not the wrong instinct. We want more of that. And so the experiment, if you will, of the first of book 0 of Raid really is an MVP and something that a lot of writers should be thinking about. The first plot arc for that story was originally figured out as a 12-chapter arc. It is the shortest arc in the entire series, and it was done so that I could get it written quickly, I could get it out quickly, and I could get the feedback as soon as possible. And an MVP is the minimum viable product. And it has all of the elements of the story. It has all of the elements of the setting. We are introduced to everything that is going to be a problem for our characters going forward. It has all of the elements there, but I was able to get it out quickly to do a full test of a full plot arc, a full story in this setting that is going to continue to unfold, and get that vital feedback to know how it would be best to go out. It's why a lot of TV shows start with a very short first season, which used to be a 12-episode season. Now we're seeing a lot of shows that are starting with a 4-episode first season. Also why a lot of shows originally started with just a pilot episode to kind of test and see how things would work. When in working with serialized fiction, you can do that pilot and really test out some of the things that you're wanting. I was concerned that some of the outlandishness of the setting would be off-putting to people that like epic fantasy. It has much more of a body horror element that comes in at one point. It has the magic is not what you typically see in this type of fiction, and I did not know if that would resonate with an audience at all. So being able to get that MVP out and get feedback from it taught me a lot of things. Everybody loves the Tugwaddles. Murder radishes are everyone's new favorite thing, and I have to call the Sawdoth magical furries in my marketing, or people come for me. They're not furries, but okay.
It's marketing.
It's marketing.
Marketing only has the slimmest relationship to the real world.
Yeah. But working on a serial, unlike working on a novel, gives you the ability to go through this kind of lean content phase where you're able to put out something that is everything that you want this series to be in a shortened format to test the market and see if the market actually wants it. It is, from my point of view, the best way to write to market, because you're actually testing out and going, hey, I have this idea. Will the market bear it?
Mm-hmm.
And if I never wrote another story after Raid, the ending of Raid, while I think is upsetting and troubling, because it definitely leads into the stories that happen afterwards, it is an end. If those 12 chapters were all that ever came out, it is a complete story, beginning, middle, and end.
I did something similar with my middle grade that I am trying to get traditionally published. I wrote a short story, it's like 1,500 word version of this. It's basically just the climax, and it got published in an anthology. So in my query letter, I can say like, hey, part of this has been published. It was desirable to somebody before. So it gives a little bit more weight. I assume, I hope, to my query letter. But yeah, I have another question.
Hmm.
With my fanfics, it was just me. For serialization, when and do you guys hire editors?
I hired an editor for Raid. I paid for editorial services for that and went through the entire thing with that. That was entirely written ahead of time. And to my shock, now granted, remember, I am old. My first published book came out in 2005. I've been doing this for a really long time. The only corrections they came back with me on were spelling and grammar. They had no notes for the story. They had no notes for the dialogue. I think there was one sentence that they highlighted and were like, maybe reword, but it works, but maybe in the entire book. And I'm not saying that in a way of like, oh, look what a great writer I am. I spent money that it's going to be hard for that serial to earn back on that service. And the results that I got back kind of gave me the courage to move forward, continuing the editorial processes that I have set up over the last almost 20 years of publishing. Oh God, have I been? Oh, sorry. Just had a moment. But if you are concerned and you feel like you need a developmental editor to come in, if you feel like you need those other editorial services, I would avail yourself of them. But do remember, especially as a writer who's going into this for business, every dollar you spend is a dollar you have to earn back before that book breaks even. Because we talk about return on investment all the time. If it will actually make the story considerably better, if it will give you the improvements that you were looking for, pay that money. It will hopefully pay dividends for you. But you need to be conscious of what you're doing in there. If you don't already have a robust editorial system for yourself, where you have learned to find those plot holes now, to find those really tortured sentences that spring forth from your brain like Athena to destroy the world, then yes, you should probably hire somebody to come in and help you with that. But it depends on how much effort and energy you want to spend on that, how much you've spent in building up those processes for yourself, and whether or not you think you can earn the money back on it. So
you sent them all your chapters at once, not one at a time?
Yeah, I sent them all of the. I wrote Raid in its entirety first because again, the purpose of Raid for me was an MVP. It was to test out the setting for myself. Am I interested in writing in this world? It was a test of, can this become a serial? Does it have the potential to keep interest throughout? And I hired them, and they did not charge me for developmental edits because they felt that it did not need them. They only charged me for the later services again because they found some spelling and grammar mistakes in it that needed to be fixed. But yeah, I sent them the whole thing because that was the purpose of that project. You can, if you want to work with an editor and you need to talk with them ahead of time. Not all editors will accept serialized fiction. I talked to them ahead of time about that in the thoughts of I may continue using them for the rest of the series because especially for developmental purposes, that developmental editor, they are not going to be they don't want to be sent your previous 12 to 30 chapters so that they understand the one chapter you're paying them to developmental edit. Mm-hmm. So you need to talk to them ahead of time and find out if they're willing to establish that kind of a relationship with you. And I worked with Rose City Editing on mine, and they were willing to help with that. And they were really good through the entire process. And I really enjoyed working with them. Jace is really good at developmental edits. I think a couple of you have used him as well. He's really, really good with that, and has a really good eye. But
he did this one.
Yeah, you need to be thinking about what it is that
I,
you're trying to get out of
everything.
this and what the quality of the work is that you're producing.
So when did you hire an editor, Carrie?
Haven't I did all my own like revisions for the serialized story that's up on Substack. The only thing I've gotten edited is my 2 currently released paperbacks.
So did you have an
But
editor?
I've done my own revisions.
Did you have the editor go over your stuff for Adventures of a Mom Author when you put it together for the paperback? Like, is it different than what was on Vella? Or is it the same?
Well, he just did like a feed.
You froze.
He just
what?
did just a basic proofread.
Oh.
For Misadventures, I just slapped everything up on Vella as I wrote it and just scheduled it a week apart. And then when I was going to put it into a book form, a friend of mine did like a proofread and the formatting.
Cool.
Eva edited part of like my brownie stories as I went,
Mhm.
and she knew that ahead of time, that it was going to be serialized and that it was like I had approximately a schedule of as the stories come out. But for the most part, like her editing, as we went, I got better at becoming familiar with what she was paying attention to as editor. So essentially, she was training me of what I needed to look at and focus on. And so by the last couple editions, she was telling me, I don't really have anything here to edit. Like, you don't really need me anymore for what I am looking at and what I, can bring to this. Because she essentially had trained me. That is not necessarily everybody's relationship with editors, but to be perfectly honest, that is actually kind of a common current with my experience with my editors over the last 25, 30 years. Of all the editors I've worked with, very quickly they train me for what are my common mistakes. And then I start noticing that I'm doing it, and then I start fixing it, and then I stop making the mistakes to start with, so, but that is just me. I'm told that is not necessarily a normal experience people have with editors.
I know we're the same person, but that was my experience with John Hart, who was one of my early editors that I worked with, and he actually spent time with me talking over why the mistakes that I made were mistakes, and to understand what it was that I was doing wrong so that I would not be replicating that in future work. And that was an invaluable experience. And again, not all editors are going to have that relationship with you.
Yeah.
But that is the relationship I had with John, and it was really, really helpful.
Yeah, that is the relationship I tend to have with editors. Even the ones that don't necessarily take me aside to explain it, I start seeing the patterns of their editorial comments, and I start addressing them ahead of time in the next issue. So that's what happened, like with my sex column I wrote, was the first 3 articles were edited by my departmental editor, and he'd send it back to me to fix/approve changes. And after the first 3 issues, or first 3 articles, and I saw what he wanted changed, I started fixing them ahead of time because it was really more about, I guess, style. Yeah. As well as, yes, I'm dyslexic. So there's, there's a couple words that I tend to misspell and not catch in the spell check. And then, but seeing someone else point this out repeatedly, I started like, honestly, I put a post-it note with how to spell it correctly. Okay, there it is. Because it's like there, like those kind of, I was picking the wrong one, it's and it's, that kind of thing. And so I just learned the difference because somebody's pointing it out. It matters. And, it was a learning experience for me. And then after that, he told me, I just don't edit yours anymore. I just send them directly to press because I know you're going to have it exactly the way you want it. Because again, even the newspaper editor did not want to change my writing voice. I really want to point that out. It's like the most common thing I have heard from people who have only recently started working with editors is be very wary of editors who are trying to entirely alter your writing voice. Good editors want to preserve your unique writing voice or help you develop it further rather than make you homogenous. And the most frequent response I've heard from essentially new writers who've hired an editor but yet had an experience, that sort of reminds me of my dog when I would take her to the vet and they would stick a thermometer up her butt and she's like, what just happened? Of where the new writer is like, I hired an editor, but I don't know how I feel about it. It's like, what happened? And every time this editor was trying to change their writing, but every time they're like, I don't know if I had a good experience. Like, if you're not sure you had a good experience, it doesn't sound like you necessarily did.
And like I've talked about before, that was my experience with my very first editor. And I fought tooth and nail to get my rights back for that book. And that book no longer exists in that form anywhere because it is a sin and a travesty against everything that I would ever put out in my life. But I was a new writer. I trusted that the editor knew what they were talking about. And we ended up with a book that I feel like did not make sense at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Speaking as somebody who moonlights as an editor, when I take on a project and I'm doing, usually it's a combination of developmental and copy editor. I'll go through the first chapter and make all the changes that I think need to be made. And then I send it back to the writer and say, okay, here's what I've done. Have I held on to your voice? Let's make sure we're on the same page here, because I'm learning how you write and I'm learning your voice and I'm learning how you want these characters to sound, as I'm reading and working on your stuff, and I don't want to change that. I just want to, I want to make it better. So, that's what I do. And I do that through the whole process. I'll send them the chapters as I get them done and say, okay, how are we doing? Are we still on track? Mm-hmm. So that we never go off the rails, like Gloria, you were saying about, those other new writers, mm-hmm. So that at the end of the book, we're both happy with, what's been produced because it's been a collaborative effort the entire way. Getting back to the original question. So my thought is sort of a hybrid of Charlie's. If you have a vigorous self-editing process, then you should be fine for the episodes themselves because you've gone through them. But before you put it into long form, when you've got all those episodes gathered up together and you put them into a novel or a novella if it's a little bit shorter or whatever it is, but into that long form, that's when you send it off to the editor, because at that point you have been looking at this thing for who knows how long, and you're going, and all the ins and outs of it, everything there is to know about it, and so you're not seeing where it's still going beep, 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 and you need that editor to come in and just sand it down a little bit so that transitions, those transitions between episodes get smooth.
That's actually what I'm planning on doing.
Yeah,
that's what I'm planning on doing with my fantasy adventure.
Yeah, so that's the recommendation, because especially with fantasy or science fiction, which tend to have longer chapters, which don't necessarily fit into the episode format. You've chopped up the chapters into episodes, and that can work, but maybe you need to take out a little bit of that promise reward that bridged the 2 episodes, because now it's a continuous chapter and people are just going to keep reading it. They don't need that hit. At least that's what I've discovered when, again, working as an editor with Kindle Vella authors who are taking their books out of Vella and into a longer format.
And I also feel like I should say I really over prepare for my serials. Like I said, I have the entire thing plotted out. And when I was working with Rose City, I actually asked if they wanted and sent them the outlines for the books that followed, so that they would see where the story was going and have a sense of what this story was setting up. Because that was another big part of it, is it needed to be a proper setup for the series that followed. And they were willing, again, to participate in that process. And do not think poorly of an editor who is not willing in participating in a process quite that elaborate. Because editors have a finite amount of time on their schedule, and learning all the ins and outs of your world building is not necessarily on their schedule of things to do. So
unless you have a dedicated editor who works with nobody but you, then it can become impractical.
Yeah. But I would not let the fear, especially as long as you are capable of stringing together sentences that work in the language you are writing in, I would not be too afraid of putting your stuff out in a serialized format without having it go through a rigorous editorial program, because that already puts you light years ahead of a lot of the other trash that's out there. Yep. A lot of the stuff, especially that's going up right now, is very broken sentences that you can tell that they took a story and ran it through Google Translate 3 times through several different languages so that it looks different.
I thought it was just me that was like, is this not English? No. Is not their primary language?
I found the YouTube channel where they're trying to teach people how to do that. I think it finally got taken down. But yeah, there was at least one YouTube channel explaining that this is how you can make your money. You take a classic book and you run it through Google Translate like 3 different times through different languages, and then put it out as your own, and then back into your native language and sell it as your own, which is why a lot of those stories have that, wow, English is not your first language feel to them. And it's because they're literally this game of telephone through a robot to generate text.
Oh, come on. Some of them, it's English, English isn't a language they've ever heard of.
Yes.
When it comes out. I mean, I've seen some absolutely ridiculously terrible ones.
Yes.
And so now that just being able to string together comprehensible sentences is a power move in the writing community right now, because so much of this weird get-rich-quick culture that's trying to pop up around these low-content books and low-effort books. And I know that the companies have some of the companies have started going after them to try to pull them down, that are really, I mean, they're literally zero effort going into them. And AI generates the plot, sometimes the entire book, sometimes they're using Fiverr to make them. They're then putting them out on Audible. Like this is a get-rich-quick scheme that a lot of people are pushing right now. And YouTube has finally declared it a verboten topic and have started taking these channels down because, well, Amazon is getting tired of the trash that's going up on Audible. It's not the stuff that's going up on Amazon. They haven't started dealing with that yet. But the amount of trash that's been flooding Audible. There was one guy who used this process and released over 100 books in a month on Audible that were just unintelligible garbage. And because of that pressure, YouTube has started taking down the tutorials on how to do this. But it really is a problem in the industry, just as writing in general right now, the amount of garbage that's flowing in. So as long as you are writing human readable text, you are so far ahead of a lot of the quote unquote competition that's out there, because a lot of it is this kind of generated crap.
I mean, it is yet another on the long list of no, AI is not coming for the job of creatives. And that when we say creatives, we just mean creative interpretation of the world. That includes driving.
Yeah.
AI is not coming for self-driving like they've been saying for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
It can't handle it.
And if you really don't understand that, just try, if you can get into Google Bard and understand, like, this is a company the size of Alphabet with the money that a company the size of Alphabet has, and it is the most condescending, confused robot on the face of the planet. Like, the stuff that is coming out of these, like, they can be useful for certain things, but they're not coming for our jobs.
Well, on that
Does
note,
that answer your question, Laura, before we go to the bio break? Okay.
we're going to take a little breaky break. And when we come back, it'll be the final leg of the podcast. So get together your final thoughts and your final questions, anything burning, so that we can answer it and wrap up, because this is the final episode of this season of Writers Roundtable. So if you got anything else, be sure to put the questions in. Yes. At the start of June, we will start the new season of Awkward Sibling Hour. The continuation of Miss Glory's finishing school for eager young things. So be sure to put your questions in the chat if you have any, and they do not have to be about serialized novels or serializing stories. They can just be your writer burning questions, and we will do our best to answer it in the final leg of the final podcast of the season. And so also, if you have nothing to drink, now is a great time to get something to hydrate with. And we will see y'all in approximately 10 whole minutes. Me mana me. Me mana me. Me mana me. Me mana moo. Me mana moo mana moo mana moo.
I'm always happy when the BBD beats go to good use.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Waka waka waka.
Welcome to the chaos.
Yeah, I'm here.
Hello, Chaos Demon. How
I
goes
had a
the
little minion
smoking?
scratching at my door.
Ooh. I see everybody's had a little chaos during their break.
I see I missed some comments. There's 16.
Yes. Hello, Books by Adrian. He's lurking because he's at work. And Laura is out walking Roy. And apparently, y'all inspired Tom to get on VelaChat. And hence, to get our stuff off of Vela, to just go ahead and bite the bullet and do it. And I put in the private chat the response, but I'm going to go ahead and read the second paragraph for y'all from the VelaChat person. However, I reviewed your request to unpublish your stories and determined your stories qualify for a one-time exception. I unpublished your story from the Kindle Vela store, and that change will take effect within 72 hours. That's right. We're special, y'all. Ain't nobody read our stuff in over a year. That was actually for both Tom's story and my story, not just the one. That was actually for both. They're just, using templates. So yes, expect to see Tom's story go up on Substack very soon. So Maggie, if you're watching this later, guess what? Tom's going to go back to writing about the siblings.
So, Michael in chat, I have to say, this is like my one claim to fame that if anybody on the Eastern Seaboard knows me, it's from the controversy I started in a fight, because I started a fight with the head of the SFWA at the time, who was very vociferous about what made a real writer a real writer. If you are writing stories, you are a real writer.
Yes.
And don't let anyone ever take that away from you. You will be a published writer when that book is published. You will be a best-selling writer if you sell enough copies, and you'll be an award-winning writer when you win an award. These are accolades that get added on top of the word writer, but anyone who has the courage and bravery to actually write a story is a real writer, because a lot of people talk about one day, and don't actually do it. So if you are writing, if you are putting words down in whatever format that they are, don't take that away from yourself. You are a real writer.
Absolutely.
And don't let anyone take that away.
CB, who only writes in fanfic, is still a real writer.
Yep.
And a decent storyteller at that.
Mm-hmm.
Who just can't find an audience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you're still a writer.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, I got into a big fight. Her agent bought me breakfast and paid for my dinner that night for me and my husband. So I did something right. But
I'm always highly suspicious of people gatekeeping. Like, usually gatekeeping comes from trying to sell something.
yeah. And her argument was, you're not a real writer until you're selling a minimum of 300 published books a week.
What?
Yes. That's what she tried to tell us.
I feel like that's more. You're not. That's not a. I would say you're not a major publisher till you're selling 300 books.
Heck, have you seen the stats on Random House now?
I know, God, like.
Talk about disillusioning even my fantasies about what's going on in the trad publishing world.
Yeah,
OMG.
It was a really upsetting thing, because at this particular convention, she was hosting a breakfast for all of the first-time writers. So all of us sitting at the table were on our first published book, and she started by asking us how many we had sold at the con that weekend. and we were all telling her our numbers, and we're very proud of our numbers. And then she immediately just poo-pooed all over our heads. And, you know, I'm just a sweet, demure person who never gets upset and never yells at anybody, ever. And I've never made a public scene in my life. But, you know...
Sometimes, yes.
Sometimes people earn it.
Well, and I will say that you said this was a former SFWA.
Yeah.
They have loosened the rules for full membership.
Oh yeah, they have.
You know, which is and you know the Vela stories that I put out, you know, starting last year, are the ones that made me enough money so that I qualified. So, you know, change is possible.
Yes, it is. Like I said, it's always important for me to remind people I'm the old one here. This was back in 2005, back at the start of my writing career, and yeah, things have luckily changed a lot since then. Some for the better, some for the worst. But
and you're not necessarily the old one. There's plenty of gray here.
I say, you don't want to hear about our mother.
I look young.
You want to hear about our mother in the RWA of the 90s.
Oh, no. No, I'm not. No, Tom. I don't need, no.
That's where I learned that words really can cut like a knife and send people to the hospital. Because our mother got a phone call that someone had to go to visit the doctor after reading her letter, and they would not be opening her letters again.
Yes. Yeah.
So please stop writing.
Yeah.
I have not been able to find it since we moved, but I used to have, it was a letter I got back from Analog Magazine that told me that I should never write anything ever again in the English language or any other language, that I should put myself out of my misery. It was the most insulting letter I've ever gotten in my life. And it was a form letter that was obviously...
That's their boilerplate?
Yes, it was obviously cut out of a sheet of larger ones that this had all been printed multiple times on one piece of paper. And I used to have it framed over my writing desk because it made me oddly happy to look at. I got that back in, that would have been 97 that I received that. But
the 90s were a wild time to be a writer, y'all. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
Like, as said, Mom was so ticked off at the very rude reply letter she got from her submissions that, yes, she took a no-holds-barred, burn-all-bridges approach. And
her response to us after this was, serves them right. There was no guilt.
Yeah, apparently, yes. She sent a gatekeeper to the hospital to have their heart checked.
Yeah, the 90s are why I'm still to this day suspicious of contracts and really make people want to read them over. I don't know that I'm allowed to say the name of the company, though I think a lot of you who have talked to in private know the name of the company. I was offered a contract to write in 98, and a part of the contract was they owned all of my intellectual property for anything I wrote while employed with them, not exclusive to what I wrote for them.
Ooh.
Yuck.
So anything that I wrote, they owned.
No.
And I fortunately had that pointed out to me in the contract. It was very much in the fine print of the contract.
Such suspicious stuff, yeah.
But I have always been very suspicious of companies, and that's why I'm
they're still doing that. My wife was offered a contract for, when she was working as a BCBA, which said anything that she wrote or produced, and she's not expected to write journal articles as a BCBA necessarily, but it was in that contract that any intellectual property that she produced while she was employed belonged to that company.
Yep.
And it's like, no, you're not working there.
right? Highly suspicious. Highly sus. I would like to also just point out, and then I will stop, that the mid 90s was when I, as an avid reader, how avid of a reader? How about a book a day? That's what I was as a teenager. I read a book a day while also working 40 to 80 hours a week in childcare. As
Mhm.
an au pair and nanny as a teenager, I was paying my family's rent. I was working that much and I was reading a book a day. And I noticed in the mid 90s a sharp drop off in the quality of books being published, as in my favorite authors suddenly slowed down or just stopped. And I think it had to do with these really sharky kind of contracts that became the du jour norm in the publishing world for a while. So again, when you see these kind of highly suspicious, very I'm so sorry, I'm going to say it anyway, shystery kind of contracts, know that these are not only bad for industry, they are bad for creativity. They are killing like all the bright creative hopes of writers who have a million cool ideas. Because let me tell you, as a sci-fi fantasy reader, that's like was my primary that well, and also romance. I was like just tearing through every paperback in Oxford, Mississippi as a teenager. Like anybody had a paperback, and I would honestly practically invite myself into people's homes just to go through their bookshelves and see if they had any pulp novels sitting on the shelf that I could borrow. I did return them, by the way. But like that's how like voracious a reader I was. But like I noticed that the best stuff was from the 70s, and then the 80s were good, and then the 90s was just a sharp drop off of like even just frequency of publishing as well as quality of publishing and the coolest ideas. There were no more cool ideas being published in sci-fi, fantasy, or frankly even romance. And now, decades later, we now know, yeah, there was a reason. It was because there were a lot of gatekeepers and people who were trying to opportunistically take advantage of even seasoned writers. So it was an industry killer in a lot of ways, this idea of trying to skim off the top.
Yeah.
So be very wary of that. And you know what? Look, I'm so sorry that, prestige is attached to traditional publishing and not indie publishing. And if you want prestige, like, yeah, you're going to pretty much be taken advantage of. I really wish that wasn't so. But just go with whatever's getting you most excited. Whatever is like keeping your creativity juices flowing to the point that your friends and family must get buckets to hold all your creativity juices in.
And
I feel like
actually,
Lori's really
Lori,
answering
that's a
this
perfect
question.
segue to that question. How do you know what story to pursue? Whatever gets your juices flowing, whatever excites you is what you ought to be writing.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not exciting you, don't waste your time on it. Come back to it later when it does excite you again. And
whatever's keeping you up at night.
Amen.
Yeah, follow that rabbit.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to add onto the publishing talk.
That's
It's something I've said, and I've heard a million times, and I've said it a million times, and it is absolutely true. If you are dealing with a publisher, somebody wants to publish you, and they're asking you for money, run.
Yes.
Yes.
Money never goes from the author to a publisher. It always goes from the publisher to the author.
Yeah, because the writer is the one doing the work.
Yeah. If
Why
they're
would you
asking you for
pay
money,
to
run.
work for other people?
And there are
I say that as
yeah.
somebody who actually paid for the privilege to be a student teacher in public education. But anyway, no comment. Look, I was foolish when I was young. But still, if you're the one doing the actual work, then you're not paid for the privilege to do the work.
Right.
And there are some major scams going around right now. I know I have received DMs on several social media platforms claiming to be from publishers that I recognize the names of, basically telling me how I could buy my way into the industry.
Oh,
and
yeah.
those are as fake as anything. And I'm really concerned how many people who
Author
are not
House.
Mm-hmm.
Author House and any of their affiliates are the most predatory. They will not leave you alone.
Yep.
If you click on the get more information, they will constantly bug you and email you, and I had to block
Yeah.
them
Yikes.
because I was foolish enough to submit information to them, and it was right after I became pregnant with my daughter, and then all of the complications that ensued after that. So they were emailing me, and I was ignoring it, and I'm like, look, I am having, I just had a baby. I don't have time to anything related to publishing. I'm putting on hold right now because I have to take care of my daughter. And they're like, oh, I got so mad. They're like, well, don't you want a daughter that you can publish your book and you can achieve your dream? And I'm like, you're really going to guilt me for putting my family first? No. Block.
Yes, they really are going to guilt you.
Again, another red flag.
Yes.
Because again,
Yeah.
guilt is a creativity killer.
Yes.
Like all of these negative, emotional, manipulative techniques are all affect creativity. And like people who genuinely want to profit from you together with you as a collab, they want you to stay creative. They want you to feel nurtured and in a special, safe environment, so you will keep making more. Like that is the difference. They want to take stress off of you, not add stress to you.
And I swear I am not being paid by them, though. Again, Chris, Hamish, if you're interested, I'm here. It's one of the reasons why I went to Substack. They only make money if I do. They get a processing fee off of any of the money that I make on the platform, and that's the only money that they get. And that does help to get a platform to align their interest with yours. And one of the reasons why I ended up settling with them as a place to try the experiment that I'm currently going on. And I feel it's important to always think about what you're doing as experiments. Like Substack is not my new home. It is not where my fiction will forever live. It may be, it's possible, but you should always be thinking of everything you're doing as a test, because something better may come along, something that fits what you're doing better may come along, and you're always just seeing what is that best fit for you. On Laura's second question, how do you know what medium it should be in? My solution to that when I'm working on a story is this a movie or is this a TV show? Like, how do you see the story breaking out? If it's a TV show, if it would be more episodic, if it would have those natural breaks in the kind of story that you're telling, so that you can do that. Tune in next time when we find out what happens to our heroes, right? If you feel that vibe from the story, it would probably work well as a serial. If you cannot imagine it as a TV show, it probably won't work well as a serial. If it's a movie, if it's something that a reader really will want to be there from beginning to end and not have those breaks, if those breaks would feel interruptive or would take away from the story, don't do it. And I think a really good example of this is Zack Snyder's career with DC. Those movies don't work because they were contemplated as a serial, but the story breaks and you don't have time to really do a full story. It's one of the many major flaws of the whole Rise of Justice League, Man of Steel fiasco thing that he led, is those are presented as if they are a continuous story, and they're not even really a continuous story within themselves. They are very episodic within themselves, which is why the Snyder Cut works better than the Justice League movie. It still doesn't work. There's still all of the other flaws that were in the Justice League story are still there, but having it broken up more episodically gave it room to breathe. And that may be my other big thing there if your story needs those breaks so that people can take in what they just read, episodic serialization tends to work better for those stories, as long as you have a means to remind them to come back and read again.
So I was answering Michael's question in the chat. What I did is I dropped. He asked, "What's a good way to get smaller stories out?" And there are lots and lots of small press which are looking for stories for anthologies. And the link I put in there is a group on Facebook that does nothing but post open calls for fantasy and science fiction. So if there's a magazine that's looking for a particular type of sci-fi story, it'll be there. Or if there's an anthology that's looking for fantasy stories, it's there. And it gets updated all the time because there's thousands of people in there who are adding to it as they hear the things. So that's just one resource, but anywhere that you can find open calls for submissions, that's a good place to start.
I would add to that also, thinking about what you want from your publishing career. I bring this up a lot to writers, of really asking yourself what it is that you want out of this, and try to figure out a road to get you to that place. This may be because a lot of my writer friends are older than me, because I started going to conventions when I was very young and befriending everyone who was a writer because they were magical beings that somehow made books happen. And I wanted to know all of their secrets. But some of them have stayed within the traditional publishing realm because it is a place that has been comfortable and accepting to them. A lot of them have gone out into the indie publishing realm because they were not getting the contracts or the deals that they wanted for their work. They did not feel that they were getting the value from their work. So trying to think a little bit ahead on what you're going for, because if there is any chance that you're going to want to be more indie, the most important thing to you is your audience and developing that audience. That is important for writers across the board, but especially for an indie, finding ways to do that kind of audience capture, generally through some kind of a newsletter or something like that, is vitally important. So that might be finding a site that will accept those stories, or a place that you can build your own enclave and start building up that audience if that's the path that you want to go. Because there are a lot of paths to publishing success now, which is wonderful for us as writers. But if the path is not your path, you are going to hate being in it. If you're really wanting to go into the traditional publishing realm, you need to find those places that will accept your stories, that will start getting you those credits getting built up, that will build you up an audience. But you also need to be building up your social media platforms, because a lot of publishers are asking for those numbers now as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So,
and an important thing, if you do get stories out into magazines or anthologies, is like Gory was talking about, read those contracts. Make sure that all you're giving them, is what you intend to give them. If you want them to be able to use that story forever, fine, and it's out in that anthology forever, so that somebody 10 years from now can pick up the book and read your story and go, oh wow, I really like this, I'm going to go look up and see what else they wrote. That's one thing. Or if it's just the right of first publication and they hold on to it for 90 days, and you can't, but during those 90 days, it's exclusive to them. And then all the rights revert back to you. Then you can use it anywhere else, and you still have it in that anthology going forward. So now you have the cred that Charlie was talking about. Mm-hmm. Look, I was published in this anthology, but you also have the story itself to use somewhere else. Charlie is dead on in, think of where you want to go and how you can use these. Short stories are gold. especially when you tie them into a larger work, because they introduce people to your characters. They introduce people to your universe. And, you know, if you get them invested in that one character, they're going to go to the bigger book, the bigger serial, the bigger series, and find out what happened to them.
And when I'm saying, like, think of your writing career, I mean, start asking yourself those big big picture questions. Do you want your stuff to eventually be adapted into a Netflix or Amazon Prime series? Do you see yourself having a movie deal at some point in the future? What are those big questions, those big things that you want to end up getting out of your career? Because if you're looking for that, what they're looking for is audience. So whatever builds an audience, because that's what they're buying when they're buying content to be adapted, is, oh, this has a built-in audience that will probably come to see our movies, and we can build on that with people that have never read the source material. So if that is an end goal for you, the real thing that you need to be doing is whatever builds an audience that will get their attention, so that you can get an agent to pitch to them, or come to their attention in a way that will actually get you the invitations that you're looking for. Mm-hmm. And always, again, look at those kinds of contracts. As somebody who has gotten a movie deal at least once for one of my books that fell through, unfortunately, read those contracts very, very carefully. And ask yourself, is that something that you are wanting? Because money can be nice, but remember, that adaptation is never going to be what your work originally was. It will have to change as it's changing medium. And if that's something that will bother you, then just pre-rule that out for yourself maybe, and move on in a different path. Having a sense of where you want your career to go, what trajectory you want to be on, will really help you figure out what avenue you want to walk in this. And unfortunately, the answer right now is whatever gets you the credibility you need for the industry you want to be in, and builds an audience that gives you the social proof that they're looking for, that will convince them that they should pick you up. And I hate that those two things really go into in tandem right now, because it does make it a bit harder in some ways, especially if you're wanting to go traditional, to build up both simultaneously. And also just do what feels right to you. Like, never second guess your gut feeling. If you feel like this will be something I might regret later, that's a big thing. You don't want to live with regret, whatever it is. So I wish I could give you like an actual path and be like, oh, do step 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 and you're gold. But this really does need to have you come in with what you're wanting out of it.
I guess my only thing to add is, like, I know writers don't know, like, at least what I've heard is other writers don't necessarily want to read the contracts entirely. But at the very least, be aware of when and if rights revert back to you, and what rights you are giving. Like, we're talking like international rights, translation rights, whatever it is. I was about to submit, this was early in the pandemic. I was about to submit to this open call thing, and it was a very cool premise. And some of y'all have actually heard, where I went with it. And it was only right as I was getting ready, I was in my final edits for this short story, that I went to the website and looked at like the full submission stuff. And that's where it had the fully downloadable contract. And I'm like, hold up, wait, you get international translation rights for perpetuity? Are you kidding me? Like, so suspicious. I was like, there was just suddenly, I noticed in the fine print all these red flags and was like, well, nope, I'm just keeping this. Which doesn't mean that I've permanently shelved that story. I actually really like this story. And so that will eventually get developed. But it's just more of, like, I am suspicious of any time where rights are forever.
Yes.
Yes.
versus it is normal industry standards that after first publishing rights revert to you, or within so many years rights revert. And believe me, the last time I wrote for a magazine, and it was like 3 years till they revert back to me, oh, you better believe I literally had the dates on the calendar of when each article came back to me, because I was still so salty that they never published my articles online. So since it was Rachel Magazine, nobody could see my work who could not get a physical copy. And so I could not use it to promote me as a writer to other people to read my works. And they were already frankly underpaying, like they were barely paying more than a penny a word. I was very salty. So it's just one of those of be aware of what you're doing, but in the end, frankly, having a good time is very important.
Yeah.
So if you don't care about rights, you don't care about anything, you just want to know that there's eyeballs reading your stuff, just do that. I mean, like, we're trying to pay rent. Maybe you're not trying to pay rent. Maybe you just need the validation. Cool. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yep.
Lotus Internet is back. Yay.
Woot
But
woot.
do what works for you. I grew up reading Silver Age sci-fi fantasy. Robert Heinlein totally ruined me for sharp contracts, because he told me that man fed me a pack of lies so that you could support yourself writing short stories and only needing to publish 3 or 4 a month to pay all your bills. Excuse me, sir.
While
I
living
was
on the
young.
moon.
Yes. Yes, the cat who walks through walls and the man who sold the moon.
And then the moon is a harsh mistress.
Oh, and the moon is a heart. I bought this hook, line, and sinker when I was young that I could do this, and then it turns out no, my sweet summer child, only in the 50s and 60s and 70s, before all these corporate takeovers of publishing houses and magazine publishing houses came about, and now it doesn't pay for shit. The dream is dead before I could even get out.
And as your living cautionary tale that I am, don't write to burnout. Like, I've done it, been there, done that, have the mental scars and trauma that came from it. All of this needs to serve you and your needs and what you're capable of doing. So when I'm talking about serialization, if you can only get a story out once a month, there's an audience that will be fine with you only putting out a story once a month. For goodness sakes, there are people here on YouTube that have built very big platforms that put out a video once a quarter, sometimes once a year. And I don't understand how they did that. They confuse me, but it has happened. It has happened. Stranger things have happened. Serve yourself first. Like, I don't want to turn into the new Uncle Harlan, because no one needs another Uncle Harlan in this world.
He was so angry.
So angry all the time.
Like my guy. I thought I was angry, and then I watched the documentary on Harlan Ellison, and it was like, never mind. I am apparently a soft, fluffy puppy. Never mind.
Yeah.
Is that what I need to just start writing in? Is just a Harlan Ellison style?
Yeah, do you need a cigar to hold in your mouth and just chew on while you do
I don't
it?
think you can write like Harlan without a cigar. I don't think that's
And like, we have the old typewriters, Tom. We've got some manual typewriters. You could just peck like he did as well if you need that. Just
you really need to be taking care of yourself. A lot of the writing advice that is out there, and one of the reasons why I bring up a lot of the bad writing advice that I see, is so that people don't fall for it. If you are working yourself to burnout, you are not building a career. You're working towards burnout. Burnout is really hard to come back from.
We don't do toxic
very hard.
productivity around here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and no toxic positive. Yeah, just none of that, y'all. It is not necessary to be good, to be successful, to have readers appreciate your writing. None of that. None of the toxic traits are necessary. And in fact, that's not what attracts readers. You know what attracts readers? Enthusiasm, creativity, a good time. Okay, we're here for a good time, not a long time, y'all.
And I bring this up a lot, but your real readers will take care of you and will stay with you through the process, whatever you're doing. When I took my 5-year mental health vacation, because I was working way too much and way too hard. Like I've said, I would still go to conventions because I enjoyed being around the people. And numerous readers would come up to me and ask me if I had a book out. When I said no, would hand me a $20 bill and say, there you go, keep writing. Because they wanted to support my work. They wanted to support me. And that's what we're trying to build as writers, is that readership that cares about what we're doing and wants to see it continue forward. And readers are a lot more forgiving than a lot of us want to believe that they are, because we want to believe that, no, the readership has such high standards. That way I can justify my imposter syndrome and never actually hit publish on anything. But
why have you come for me today, Charlie? I thought we were friends.
It's my job. It's what I'm here for. But they really will be forgiving, and they really will help you through.
And you do it well.
It's my job.
But, and this may come from my background as somebody who wrote a lot of code, but if you're not hitting the commit, if you're not getting the commits, you didn't write any code. Yeah. Like, that's not, you didn't do it. And if you were, it's all right. If you just want to write stories that only you read, go for it. I am not trying to shame anyone who is just writing for themselves and is never going to put it out into the world. That's not what I'm about here. But if you're wanting to put stuff out, you have to be getting to that commit. You have to be getting to that point where you're publishing however feels most comfortable to you. And right now in my life, serialization is the best option for me, because I am still struggling with a lot of the issues that were created and caused my 5-year mental health vacation, because I really did burn it out. I was writing for, I think, 14 or 15 blogs at the time. I was doing 8 podcasts, and I was doing a serialized series of short stories and still writing novels. No, I did not sleep for a long time. I did way too much, and I am still recovering from that. Don't think that quantity is better than quality. If you're putting forward good stories that your audience cares about, they will come through with you. So don't be thinking, oh God, I could never serialize because how could I put out a story a week? It doesn't have to be that. You can set your own goals. You can set your own timetable and be honest with your audience. The only reason I told people that the Shadow Phoenix Saga was coming out every Tuesday is I had written it all. All I had to do was get it scheduled. Everything was done by the time I started telling people that story was coming out. There was no issue in me being able to deliver those stories because they were all done. Am I going to say that for book 2? No. I am going to guarantee a minimum of 1 chapter a month because I know that I can deliver on that. If there are more, they're bonus. They're bonus. And I'm going to be very honest and open with my readership so that they know what they're getting from me. And that's what you need to, that's how you develop a relationship with your readers. Because that's really, I keep going back to that idea, and it's not because I'm trying to like pull in like social media, content creator, influencer vibes here. That's really what serializing is. I'm making a contract with you as a writer. I'm going to give you this much story in this much time frame for this much of your attention and or money. And you make that contract with them. You want them to deliver on their part where they're showing up with that attention and that money. You have to show up with that story. So if you know that it's going to take you 3 months to write a chapter, let them know. Quarterly, you will be getting new chapters of this. And believe it or not, there will be people, as long as your story is compelling, that will come back for that. But definitely be honest with yourself, and don't scare yourself out of doing something that you're interested in because you think it needs to fit into someone else's schedule. That's the wonderful thing that has happened since the internet has occurred, is we have a lot more options for how we get published and how we connect with our readership. And as long as you're open and honest with them, because that open honesty is vitally important. Once you betray that trust, it's really hard, if not impossible, to get it back. If you tell them, give me X amount of money and I will give you X amount of story, and you don't deliver, people will be mad at you, and justifiably so. So be thinking about what it is you can do. and work within those confines. And it's doable for anybody, whether you're doing it through Vela, through Substack, through Royal Road, Radish, any of the services that are out there. As long as you're reading the contracts and making sure you're okay with them, you can build that platform for yourself. And that's really what this is about building that relationship with your readers.
Mm-hmm.
For goodness sakes, I've had some success in my attempts to serialize stuff on World Anvil.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was testing World Anvil up against Vela when Vela first launched, and I got about 9 times the readership from World Anvil that I got from Kindle Vela, and they were going to my coffee and putting money in. So I was still making money for it, even though it wasn't behind a paywall. So readers will support you as long as you give them ways to do it, and as long as you don't lie to them.
So, does anyone have any further questions, or are we ready for final thoughts?
Final thoughts.
All righty, there it goes. Have at it. Unburden your chest and your heart. What you got? Wear sunscreen.
I guess. Okay.
One
There you go. Go on.
One little thing we didn't really discuss at any point earlier that I feel like just should be mentioned, because if you watch enough serialized fiction, you read enough, eventually you'll come across this, and we didn't really mention it, but this is okay, and your readers will be happy as long as it's an occasional feature, which is you can also just put in little side stories. You know, we often miss out on, especially in major fandoms, you'll hear the filler episodes. And yet a lot of discussion about in the fandom comes from those filler episodes where nothing really happens towards the ending story arc, but we learn more about the world. We learn more about the characters individually. We learn more about their background.
Mm-hmm.
Batman the animated series almost got him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which it's still fun to watch. I still love watching that episode. As long as it's not like every other chapter is a filler chapter, just what's going on. People love to occasionally get those little, if you just like, I'm not feeling up to writing more of the story, but I kind of want to write in this world. Go ahead. People love that. Give them those options, even of, since like in Substack, you can make posts, you can make separate sections. You can even have a separate section of, here's the B stories for, your main story. If, you want to give people the option of only seeing the major story arc. And then it's like, but I also write for, here's what happens on the side. Here's what happens when, they take a break at a hotel or something. Here's the, happens in the past stories. Don't forget to put those in to essentially add flavor and color to the world you make. Sometimes people just want to speed read through and know that main story of what happens. But after that, they want to come back and get the rest of that world.
Just don't pull Naruto and do 20 episodes in a row of it.
I mean, it's still not quite up to Dragon Ball standards, but Naruto has definitely tried to get close.
Yeah.
Oh God, Dragon Ball, why are you?
Yeah, it's not a race to the bottom, okay?
But like the filler episodes are what people really talk about with both One Piece and even more so recently, what's that one? Trigun.
Mm-hmm.
It's those filler episodes. People are like, but why couldn't it have gone a different way? And so I just wanted to bring that up. If you're writing serial, go write with everything you can in this type of field.
And what you were just saying, Tom, echoes what I was saying towards the beginning about the new book. that I'm putting out. It's the filler stories. It's the extras, the getting to know yous, and the previous volume of them is one of the more popular books that I've put out because people want to know. So yes, absolutely, develop those characters, develop those circumstances, do that world building. Just don't do it all the time. And it's come up a bunch of times. Have fun with it. Have fun with what you're writing. Charlie made a great point about Babylon 5. If you want to start writing a serial and you're loving it, make sure you're building in some of those exit points so that if you get to a point, if you get down the road and you're going, I'm pretty much done writing this, even though I know the story isn't over, build in those escape, that little escape hatch for you so you can at least wrap it up enough so that your readers are going, okay, all right. And I can imagine the rest. And then they start writing fan fiction about it.
Yes.
What I'm loving about serialization and what
I'm going
the
to
reason
go
I'm-
to what.
Sorry, Carrie, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I'm probably on a delay again. I'm going to go back to one of Laura's questions that she had put in the chat when her internet died was, how do you know which story to pick?
Mm-hmm.
And when I started writing Adventures of Thera, which is the fantasy adventure that I just started my stack earlier this month, it was the story that kept me up at night. I was supposed to be working on edits for this thing. And I couldn't get these characters and this world out of my head. I was up late until late night. And like my husband, it could be like 1 a.m. My husband would wake up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom, and why are you still up? I gotta get this idea down. Babe, go to bed. And when those moments are rare, at least for me,
Mm-hmm.
where you just cannot sleep and you are constantly like, I don't want to go to work. I want to work on this. I want my kid to sleep. Others like, work on this.
See, what has drawn me to serialization is
Go ahead, Charlie.
because of my problems, again, with overexerting myself previously and really kind of rebuilding my career on the other side of it. I like to refer to what I'm doing as I'm writing Saturday morning cartoons for adults.
Mm.
It is all of the stories that I'm working on right now are so much fun to write. I have actually gotten to the point where I get upset when I'm done editing because I don't get to read them again. And I've never had that experience with my fiction. Usually I know that the editing is almost done when, dear God, if I ever have to read the story again, I'm going to stab my own eyes out. But I'm actually in this place where I'm like, I love these characters. I love these stories, and I'm having so much fun with it that I want to do more, and I want to just spend as much of my time with them as I possibly can. And that's what I'm getting from serialization. These are like, I'm a kid I grew up in the 80s. I remember Saturday morning cartoons and that excitement of the new episode is out, and really getting into those stories. And that's basically what I'm able to recreate for myself and for the readership that I've been building for them. And that they're whimsical, they're weird, they're strange. They're something that probably would not ever fit in a mainstream traditional publisher because of the quirks of the story and the way that they're being told. But I'm absolutely loving making them. And just the idea that I get to go back and keep visiting this world and telling these strange, sad, tragic stories and continue to build out on this world, it motivates me to get up. and to be writing. And that, for me, whatever medium you find that makes you go, I have to get out of bed, there's a story to tell, you found the medium you should be working in as a writer, whatever that is. If it's novels, novellas, short stories, drabbles, whatever that is for you, hold on to it and run with it. And for me, right now in my life, serials are that. I get to just obsess over all of the elements of a chapter, down to, is there too much blood on that skeletal monster that's coming to kill my villains, or not enough? And I obsess about that in a way that I really get to just spend time with it and then send it out into the world. Because if I was writing this as a novel, I would have a little bit of time to worry about that, because I would be rushing on to go to the next chapter, to get it out, to keep schedule for that kind of publishing schedule that book publishing really wants you to have. I get to spend a week on each story and spend time with each chapter and get the characters the way I want them to be and the wording the way that I want it to be. And then I get the dopamine of scheduling it to go out into the world and know I finished a thing. And I'll say this right now, if you have not gotten to the point yet in your writing career where you have finished a thing, write a short story today. It can be the worst short story ever. Write a short story today so you can get that dopamine hit of, oh, I finished a story. Because it's magic and it's wonderful.
It is.
But that's why I'm doing what I'm doing right now. It motivates me to get up in the morning. I'm sitting up at night with my insomnia, and I'll just load up Midjourney and start making preliminary thumbnails for the artwork to go with each episode, because I can't stop thinking about the characters. Like, I'm literally making fan art of my own characters to use as promotional material for these stories because I'm in love with them so much. And I want that to be your goal too. Love what you're doing. Your readers will definitely see that love and they will respond to it in kind.
Gloria, do you have any thoughts?
I said mine or something.
There's been so many I've forgotten.
I mean, like, I think I have said my thoughts on it, which is you need to protect your creativity and value what makes you feel enthusiastic. But other than that, have a good time. I mean, writing is a marathon, not short stories. Like, technically are sprints, but the truth is, when you're in editing, they're a marathon. At least once you get to be editing for decades, yeah, that's marathon editing. Even editing a short story is going to take that, okay, let me pace myself so I can keep the energy. I guess I need to eat a sandwich. So it's just like...
Food is for mortals.
Oh, God. Such a mood.
I mean, CB sounds pretty much like what you're talking about. So tempted to stay up, finish the watching Spider-Man Homecoming chapter she's writing. I'm like, when you're inspired and you're enjoying what you're doing, you want to keep doing. It doesn't feel like a punishment or a slog. It's something you enjoy and it's rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember during various editing articles of going ahead in the morning and packing a lunch, even though I'm just going to write in my room. Because that way I can keep going and not be interrupted by such mortal needs such as food, like food preparation. But, like, wanting to be in the zone and stay focused, I mean, it is a heady, drug-like experience. So when you can lean into that, do so. But really, I guess it's really about, like, whatever helps you love this craft. I mean, we weave worlds. It's pretty freaking cool. So whatever can help you stay in that mood, that mode, is valuable, and you should protect that. So I know some people who have people in their lives whom they love, but can say rather critical things. And so they choose to just not tell those people anything about their writing till it's ready to publish or has been published already, so that the criticism won't put a dampener on their good time. Whatever you have to do to protect that, do so. Whether you write in secret or you write in the dark, whatever you need to do it. It's perfectly valid. It's normal. You are not the first writer. You will not be the last writer. I used to know a writer who was raising 3 kids. She was pregnant with a 4th. And the woman wrote an entire novel in a 14-month span just in the time she was going to the bathroom and bathing. And I'm like, how? She's like, oh, you just learn this is the only time the children give you any time. So you just do it. So I was like, so are you trying to tell me this entire manuscript that I was like helping her edit was written while you pee, poop, and bathe? And she's like, yeah, all of it. If I wasn't doing one of those 3, I wasn't writing. And it was like, kind of puts it in perspective. Such dedication. She's like, I couldn't get this story out of my head anyway. I looked forward to, I would like chug water just so I could go pee. And the kids heard it. She's like, and there were times where I was literally writing with one hand and pouring water into a toilet with the other, so the kids would still think I was still peeing. So I could like get another couple sentences out. Because if you've ever raised young children, they will bum rush that door even before you flushed. And so, yeah, like
Get the
she's
little
like,
fingers underneath the space in the door, like, Mommy,
right?
what are you doing?
Fingers. Oh my God, the fingers under the door. Like, what is this feral animal?
Mommy, what
And
are
I
you doing?
said to her, is that why you have a picture in your bathroom? She's like, yes, my children still haven't figured it out.
I'm sensing a collab between Laura and Carrie for a horror story about the kid that won't leave the mom alone.
Sticky Fingers, the novel. So
Finger gaps.
yeah. Oh gosh. Oh, so like that's how like even as somebody who's worked as an au pair, I had like to this day I always pull my pants up before I flush the toilet because I got into this habit because children will bum rush the door the moment they hear the flush. You still haven't pulled up your pants all the way. But yeah, she wrote an entire manuscript novel just in the little gaps of personal free time she had. And I was like, I don't know how you stay focused that long. And she's like, I could not get the story out of my head. So pretty much I was figuring out the story and then just going to go pee or whatever, and write out the next couple lines that were already floating in my head and just keep offloading them essentially.
A good portion of the first draft of Welcome to Coolersville was on my 15-minute breaks when I was working retail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because, like, when a story has you gripped like that, it is practically magic. So lead into that versus, like, gosh, so much of the 21st century is about poo-pooing everybody's good time. And if you listen to regular people, it will just take all the fun out of this craft for you. Oh, I can't share this enthusiasm with others because they'll be like, I can't believe you're so excited. Like, ignore all those people. They're miserable.
Aren't all artists tortured?
No.
Artists do not
are
write.
having a great time.
Artists do not create art while they are tortured, only when they are not being tortured and they are having fun.
Yes.
I feel like I want to say, please go to projectshadow.com and read my Substack post titled I Want to Make an Art, which is all about the myth of the tortured artist. Self-promo! Yay!
But yeah, that's my final thought. Honestly, that's my final thought about like Writers Roundtable for this season of don't let anybody dampen your good time. We're writers because we can't be anything else. Like we can't get it out of our head. These stories haunt us. It is a thing that, in another world they might send people to therapy for. But instead we're like, let me weave you a story.
Do I have a table thing for my bathtub so I can write in the tub? Yes, I do.
Yes. It's a problem. We are all haunted by imaginary characters And it is like not a mental illness, but sometimes it feels a little like it. I used to have a psychiatrist friend who's like, tell me more about the characters who haunt you. And I'm like, dude, I'm not delusional. I know. And he's like, I just need to verify. Like, and this is what he would invite me out to eat at dinner so he could just try to understand the difference between writers and schizophrenics. Just like, okay.
Being
I
able
was
to
like
have
lost
like
out of there for a
Google
sec.
Docs or Word on your phone is like the best and worst thing that
How many
could ever
times
happen.
at 2 a.m. have I pulled up my
Because you don't
Google
have to
Doc?
put it down.
Poor Roy. Sometimes when I have insomnia, I'll get up at 2 a.m. and come to my laptop and just write for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Why
that's
doesn't it
how
feel-
my vampire romance came into being.
Doesn't it
Was
feel
2 to
so
4
good?
a.m.
Like if you can't sleep or you wake up in the middle of the night and you're able to write, like getting all of that out till you feel like a spent shell, but like you sleep like a baby afterwards. Like it's practically a drug sleep. It's
I still
so
had
good.
energy, so I did dishes and then I went to sleep.
But like it is awesome. Like it is a heady experience. Like there was like several years when I was like truly getting burnt out at the public library that I had told Tom I don't write anymore. I've given it up. I can't juggle both this really toxic job and work environment and write and come up with creative things. And he's like, okay. Meanwhile, y'all, almost every night I'd wake up in the middle of the night and not be able to fall asleep and have to write for 30 to 40 minutes. I literally have stenopads upon stenopads of all these stories that pretty much I'd go back to sleep after I wrote it and I'd forget that I had written it. So I still thought I wasn't writing, but it was like when I started going back over my stenopads after I left that absolutely horrible job and going, oh, wait, I actually had been writing for years. It's all in here. And Tom's like, yeah, I just had to go along with your ideas so that you would keep doing it. But yeah, I was like, yeah, I just forget it.
Yeah, like I did have years where my creativity was shut off,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
through finding the right mental meds and being in a less stressful environment, I've been able to like have the floodgates open and my creativity has returned. It's so nice.
It's so wonderful, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it feels like the more complete you.
Yeah.
Even though it's this really erratic chaos creature that like keeps spinning stories even when you have other important things to do like bathing and driving.
Can I just say how much I love when you said that and Roy growled?
Yeah, he's like,
He
oh,
wants me to play so bad with this octopus.
this poor baby. Mommy ignores him all the time.
There you go.
I mean, because what I really hear is just the whole, for case in point of the tortured artist example and versus the reality, people think of Van Gogh, and the truth is, all the art he painted in an almost manic state when he was having fun and enjoyed life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
That's what they all commented about. Is when you see him out there painting in the fields and stuff, he had this big grin on his face. He was having fun.
Yeah, it was during the period where, what was it, his brother-in-law, the doctor, had finally found him a medication that helped deal with his seizures, his epilepsy, and his other, because like after an epileptic seizure, I think he would have that refractive depression. And so to be free of that for a couple months was when he did this frantic, hence why there's so much yellow. Is the side effect of this drug is you see yellow like it's on fire. It's like electric yellow. But yeah, it was when he finally got some medication that worked for him. So again, creativity happens when everything else lines up, not when the artist is tortured and mentally suffering or mentally ill. No, it's when all those finally abate and the stars align for a moment.
Like that's one of the reasons why CB is able to do Nano so well and so so much is she spends several weeks before each Nano month getting all the foods and everything arranged, so she has nothing to worry about for a whole month, and she just devotes herself to writing. And she writes at a store,
Mm-hmm.
but it's first you have to not have to worries.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And I think that, yes, writing can be great fun. Sometimes you lose the spark for a story and life just gets hard and you lose steam, and that's okay.
Yeah.
You can put things aside and let them be on the back burner while you sort out life. Like, it's not like there is a deadline for the universe or your story will self-destruct. It's okay. You can still get back to it eventually. And while you're on the break, your mind will start processing through different avenues of, well, what if this happened? Oh, this is how I could do it without a MacGuffin. Oh, amazing. And so
if your brain hits that roadblock, a lot of times it's just where you can't continue the story. It's not sure where to go. It's just trying to force you to give a pause while it works out more ideas. It's not a this is the end. It's just it's a pause.
Yeah, I've been paused on my sci-fi duology for a year and a half now, because I need to level up my sci-fi game before I tackle it again. And I've been focusing more on my horror aspect, and so I'm gonna read a sci-fi in June. So we'll see if that sparks anything. But yeah, reading for inspiration can help. Writing down all of the things that make you happy about certain projects can help. And just, if deadlines make you super anxious, don't impose those on yourself. Like, if a deadline is needed to make you be able to break down your goal so that you'll have progress, do that. But if it just makes you super anxious, go with the flow and see where it takes you for a bit. And you can always course correct. Yeah.
Right. Well, all right. What to expect next Monday for the beginning of Awkward Sibling Hour? Oh, I have no idea. I know, I'm the one in charge.
Tune in on Twitch Wednesday and find out.
Join us Wednesday night on Glory Writes the Blues Twitch channel to find out what it's going to be while we get ready for Monday's show. There will be writing sprints. I don't know. Like, the truth is, I left the steno pad in my room. I forgot to get it.
I would say it's right now. It's essentially I gave Glory my ideas for articles I'm working on writing, and it was essentially letters to my younger self of here's the answers to all those questions my teenage self had that I did figure out.
Dear younger me, no one's that cute. Get over it. Thank you.
Excuse me, have you seen Roy?
Nice. So, yeah, stay tuned. We hope you'll join us. It's going to be grand, whatever it is. And if you have some feedback about suggestions you think we should look at for doing episode subjects for June and July, let us know. August will be the start of a new season of Creative Recharge. And so far, we are still looking at possibilities for episodes, including Jane Austen remakes and action adventure movies you must know of. That's right. I'm trying to get you to watch True Lies. Deal with it.
And
Yes, and or RRR or whatever. No, nobody can agree on what it's called. But I just know that apparently you could use motorcycles and tigers as catapult weapons.
It's great. It's so over the top. I love it so much.
So, yeah, we will see you next week. Thank you all so much for coming. And please do check out our lovely and talented panelists. There are links down below in our show description of everybody. So please keep track of that. Also, I've now put the Substack links, and then at the very bottom of the description is the links of all the other author tubes that, are great and make us feel included and are cool folks. Do check them out if you haven't already, or if you're not subscribed, please do check them out. Thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to our fantastic panelists. You have made this an amazing episode. We're going to wave you all off and say good night, y'all. Good night.